of doing the part before the part, but I'm actually here to introduce the student that made this possible. So Amy Brooklyn is with us. She's a current graduate student with the BSM program, which is our Environment and Sustainability Management program. She is the reason that our esteemed speaker is here today, and she's going to tell you about the speaker. I'm just going to take a small moment to tell you about Amy. So she has excelled at researching and presenting on a number of topics, and is one of those people in the cohort that makes the cohort better, not only for academic achievements and capability and putting her on teams, but also how she interacts with the rest of the cohort. So we're all better for having her both part of that program, and now clearly she's bringing additional value to the program by bringing in wonderful people. Some of the things just to keep in mind that she's done, that she's researched, and you could even ask her about, is decarbonizing the US cement industry, altruism in Wales as a form of community dynamics, super interesting. Caribbean island of Dominica's climate resilience plan, also really neat on how they've worked that and designed that program. And decarbonizing the international shipping industry are just some of the examples. So when you look at the breadth and depth of that kind of work, it's another reason we're excited to have them in the program. For her capstone, she's working on the city of DC to help them achieve their goal of getting net zero. So we're seeing obviously a broad range of capabilities there. You should ask her about it. In addition to that, she is looking to start a career in community climate resilience and is actively job seeking. So you should ask her about that too. I will not in any way, shape, or form slow this down anymore. So I'm going to hand it off to Amy, who's going to tell you about hers.
I'm so kind and only a little off the script that I said. I'm so thrilled to introduce you all to my good friend, inspiring researcher and writer Ilenia Romani. Ilenia is a PhD candidate in analytics for economics and management at the University of Brescia, Italy, and is a visiting PhD student at MIT for the Center for Energy and the Environmental and Policy Research in Boston. She is there working on a project focused on critical mineral mining in the United States. She's also a researcher in the raw material for the energy transition program at Fondazione Eni Enrico Mattei in Milan. Her research focuses on environmental and resource economics, and for her PhD project, she's studying the topic of key minerals for the energy transition, both empirically and from a macroeconomic modeling perspective. At a conference in Italy in February, a part of Ilenia's PhD thesis, now available as an MIT working paper, was awarded the Young Environmental Economist Award by the Italian Association of Environmental and Resource Economists. This award is given to the best paper presented by a young economist at the annual conference of the association. After finishing her work at MIT last July, Ilenia embarked on a cross-country road trip to see and explore the American West. The trip included a visit to the Grand Canyon and California beaches along many gorgeous and exciting sites. But when she talks about it, it's clear that the highlight that stood out above all else was the lithium mine in the Southwest that she got to visit. She's earning awards and recognition for her work, but it is clear we are about to hear someone today who is truly passionate about what she does. Please help me give a warm welcome to Ilenia.
Everyone, I was scared about the anecdote. I guess it's all right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's an honor. I'm very, very excited to spend together this hour. I think I don't need to introduce myself, as Amy already provided an excellent introduction. I just say that by scanning this QR code, you can take a look at my profile and project if you want. And the only key point from this slide is that I'm an economist, and my work is around raw materials for the energy transition. I hope that the term economics does not automatically translate into boring for you. But rest assured, this talk will not be overly technical, as I know that the audience has pretty heterogeneous background. However, I will be more than happy to address technicalities and comments and more in-depth issues after the talk. Speaking of which, I know we have a Q&A session at the end of the talk, but if you prefer, feel free to interrupt if you have any doubts about what I'm saying, or questions or comments. I'm happy if we keep it interactive. Perfect. Let's begin our journey. The title is Critical Minerals for the Energy Transition. We have three elements to explore, plus my work, and the talk will address each of them sequentially. First, we're going to see energy transition, the context very briefly, because I know you're knowledgeable about that, and the state of play and the future of these critical minerals for the energy transition. Then we're going to address the issue of criticality. What does it mean? How is it possible that it changes through time and through countries? And go a little bit in depth around the perspective of the US and the European Union. Finally, we're going to see the object itself of the talk, which is these minerals, from an economic perspective. So the market fundamentals, the demand, supply, and price dynamics a little bit, and the risk in terms of environmental, social, and cost point of view. And then finally, I will steal some time to present very, very briefly some insights from my current work. Okay, the energy transition. I don't know if you're familiar with this graph. It's the warming stripes. I love it because it's graphically very beautiful and it conveys the message in a straightforward way. We have every band represents a year from the 1850s, to the 2022. And the blue stripes are those years that were warmer than the average, and the red ones that were colder, than the average, and the red ones are years that were warmer than the average. And the trend is striking. We are now at the very, very, very brown, dark red, and 2023 is even worse. So the trend is global warming. I hope we all agree on that. And rising at a very, very fast pace in the last few years. So to combat global warming, there's widespread consensus on the urgent need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions globally. And governments are setting ambitious targets like achieving the net zero emission (NZE) by 2050. Some of the proposed solutions involves transitioning the energy sector. And so now we are talking about the energy transition. And among other things, the energy transition requires gradually phasing down or even phasing out fossil fuel-based energy generation in favor of clean energy technologies. So, for example, here it's what we need to do if we want to achieve net zero emission. And as of today, you can see that the fossil fuel-based sources, natural gas, oil, and coal, represent the majority of the share. But if we want to achieve net zero emission, these slides has to decrease notably and make some space for the renewable parts, which have to increase considerably: wind, solar, and hydro. Currently, we are here at the peak. We really have to put a lot of effort in order to change the direction of our future and our emissions. As of today, there has been more attention, more progress, but we're still lagging behind. But I think the COVID year could be considered really as a turning year in terms of these achievements. Here you can see the percentage change between 2019 and 2020. And we can see that for what concerns the energy demand, it decreased, so now it's negative for oil, coal, and gas, and nuclear, while for modern renewables, it increased a little bit, but still better than nothing. And the trend is even more striking for mobility. Total cars demand has declined from 2019 to 2020, but for electric cars, huge increase. So we are really in a kind of very good period, more or less, for this change in trend, change in demand of consumers. However, The adoption of clean energy technologies, both for transportation but also for power generation, implies a significant increase in the demand of some minerals, which are inherently non-renewable. Why? Because, as you can see, clean energy technologies require these minerals in much greater counterparts than their fossil fuels. So, for example, here you see the comparison between electric car and conventional car. The electric type requires 6 times the mineral inputs of a conventional car, simply because it's not burning oil or gas. And similarly, for power generation, you can see how bigger is the amount of mineral requirements for offshore wind, onshore wind, and solar PV compared to, for example, coal power plants and natural gas power plants. So, for example, an offshore wind plant requires 13 times more mineral resources than a similarly sized gas-fired plant. So, pretty different mineral requirements in the renewable technologies. And this graph tells the same story in a different way. The tiny yellow circles represent the share of low carbon out of the total new power generation capacity. Clearly, it's increasing. We're happy about this. However, what's increasing together is the mineral intensity, obviously. As the share of the power generation is going to be more and more renewable, the mineral intensity is gonna increase along with it. Minerals, which, as I said, are non-renewables, they're non-renewable resources, as much as oil or gas are not renewables. Okay, so far we've seen the state of the art where we are, but what about the future? I hope you agree with me that it's really crucial to understand, for example, the expected increase in demand of these critical minerals, and together with that, anticipate future supply criticalities and trends, and also prices. The International Energy Agency is doing a wonderful work around this issue, and they've developed 2 different scenarios for the future in order to study different outcomes of what we could see. They developed the Sustainable Development Scenario, which is the world we would live in if we were able to achieve net zero emission targets, and clear on time and in full. And what does it mean? Dramatic extra push for the deployment of various clean energy technologies. Very optimistic. But we can use it, as a benchmark or kind of an effective scenario. And then the counterfactual scenario is the status quo, the stated policy scenario. So where we are going if governments and policies keep doing what they have been doing up to now. Okay, so no extra push. Yeah, exactly. No extra push from the government, just keep doing what they've been doing. And obviously, this is not enough in order to achieve those sustainability net zero emission goals. But it's interesting, to do this mental thought exercise to see where we're going in this case and where we're going in this case. These are some of the results. So here you see the status quo one. No? So we keep doing what we've been doing, and we've been doing something. No? So as you can see, the mineral demand for these different renewable technologies is increasing, especially for the electricity networks. However, if we really wanted to achieve the net zero emission target, we would need to be here. And as you can see, the difference in terms of mineral requirements is huge, especially for what concerns the yellow part, which is electricity networks, and the red part, which is electric vehicles and battery storage. And these are very, very important uses of these critical minerals. Same story, but focused on the minerals, lithium, graphite, cobalt, nickel, and manganese. On the left, we have the status quo, and on the right, we have the sustainable development scenarios. You can see it's indexed. You can see the difference of mineral demand, especially for lithium, graphite, cobalt, and nickel, if we were to achieve this net zero emission target. So the picture is very complex and a little bit problematic, but also fascinating, in my opinion. And so the International Energy Agency is about the critical minerals, not for the energy transition. And the term critical has a very precise meaning. So let's delve into it together. Perfect. The definition, one of the definition is in the top right of the slide. So a critical mineral is a mineral or element that is essential for modern technology and cannot be easily substituted with a different mineral. And B, there's a risk that the supply chain of that mineral could be disrupted. So let's imagine a resource that is extracted at very high costs and long lead times. It takes more than 16 years on average to develop projects from discovery to the first production. Like, our goal is to get to net zero emission by 2050. So I don't know if 16 years is a little bit of a worrying average. And as a consequence, with such a slow and complex supply, there are market slumps and price spikes. For example, during periods of scarcity with low supply, as a consequence, you have higher prices and government express concerns, and then tension arise. And when a certain type of politics comes into play, it's also easy to dip into resource nationalism. So when you see that market cycles comes along together with the political cycles, it becomes particularly tricky, and it's always the case nowadays. And so when we talk of resource nationalism, the main concerns of governments are, for example, the impact of disruptions in the global supply chain and what do they mean for the domestic economy. And also another very important issue, especially for the US and the European Union also, is that of import dependency. If you are not a resource-rich economy, you need to import these minerals, and importing them all from one country, we know how risky that could be. I think the European Union had a very harsh lesson from the Russia-Ukraine war with gas. So and then everybody started talking about energy security. I see a very strong parallel with these critical minerals. Another thing I want to highlight is that, and maybe it's becoming clearer already, is that the concept of criticality is a relative concept. It depends who you are and where you are in the supply chain. So, for example, for countries that are not resource rich, they will have an import dependency focus. Their criticality is that of import dependency. They will include in their criticality risks metals and minerals which are of high importance to a particular industry. For example, electric vehicles for the US, Tesla, but however depend on raw materials that the US is currently not producing, not developing. However, criticality is also an issue for those countries which are resource rich. For example, I don't know, Chile for lithium, it has that resource very much in abundance, and it could use it as a very strong leverage for its economic development and its economic growth, employment, investment opportunities, and whatsoever. And so it could use that dominant position in the global supply chain in order to gain an international competitive advantage. And both these types are criticality, but as you can see, they mean almost the opposite thing. Because, as I said, criticality is a relative concept. And as a result, the criticality evolves over time. This is the criticality metrics developed by the US, short term and medium term. And as you can see, for example, there are much more red dots in the long term, in the medium term. So that's a little bit worrying, but it makes sense, no? Because demand is going to increase in the following years, and more elements are gonna become critical. And sorry, I haven't explained the axis of the metric. So this is the supply risk. So how risky it is for the supply. And in this case, since it's developed by the US Department of Energy, the y-axis is the importance to energy, no? And so you can kind of prioritize the elements. And here you have the more risky, here in yellow, the medium, and in green, those that are pretty much okay. And so, for example, now in this case, I want to point out that lithium and nickel are medium critical in the short term, but then boom, they become critical around 2025 and 2030. And this is a very nice policy tool, in my opinion, because it gives like a straightforward idea of what's important and what's not, like a sustainability metrics in consulting. So criticality evolves through time, but changes for countries too. The previous metrics was that of the US. This is the one of the European Union. Much more critical elements down there. Europe is not in a great position because basically there's nothing. There's a funny anecdote. Italy has one of the biggest deposits of titanium in the world, but it's in a national park. So you cannot touch it. You can absolutely do nothing. But I think it's very interesting from a I don't know, almost philosophical perspective. Like we need those minerals in order to do an energy transition, in order to live in a better world, environmentally safer, and not destroy the natural resources. But in order to do that, we might have to destroy, I don't know, to kill the deers in the natural park in Italy. I mean, I hope they will never. But and there's also a similar case in the US. If I'm not wrong, like a wild flower in Nevada, and there's very important lithium deposit, and there's been some issues and problems going on around there. But yeah, I hope they take the right decision. But that's also one of the reasons why the development of a project takes, for example, 16 years. Like you really need to think of everything. But we're gonna so sorry. European Union much more critical minerals. It's in a different position compared to one of the US, even though it's equally interdependent from other countries. And this one, this is was very happy I was able to find such a graph. It compares the critical mineral elements for the EU, China, and the US. As you can see, some of them are common for the three of them, even though with different meanings. For example, here we have graphite is critical for the EU, the US, and China. However, EU and US are net importer of graphite. Totally, I think they have zero production. And China instead controls 100% of the refined graphite, like 100. It's almost total, basically a total monopoly. And as a consequence, the criticality is very different. Has very different meaning for the two groups, no? The import dependence one and the very strong exporter Chinese economy. And but then, for example, other elements are just critical for the EU or just for the US or just for China. So it's very relative. And so different governments have different interests and different objectives, clearly, and as a consequence, they implement different policy interventions. Here I've used a very nice tool by the International Energy Agency. It's called the critical minerals policy tracker, and they source all the policy interventions in this domain, and it allows you to compare what countries are doing. And notice the difference between the US and the EU. The US is doing, the numbers are a little bit tinier, I'm sorry, but most of the US interventions are based on promoting exploration, production, and innovation. While the European Union is focused mostly on ensuring supply reliability and resiliency. So EU focused sustainability. And while the US focus is more of producing their own domestic supply chain. And it makes sense because US are a global superpower. There's China rising a lot on this matter, and clearly the US doesn't want to be left behind. So that's fair. This is a little bit more in detail on two very important policies that US and EU have developed around the topic, but I'm not going to focus on that. Just remember the name of the policy, the Inflation Reduction Act, super famous by the Biden administration. Huge amount of investments in general for the energy transition, and some specifically just going towards domestic mine development production, and also demand subsidies to incentivize the use of electric vehicles. Basically, it's about everything related to the green transition, but it's not at all about inflation. So, and then the Critical Raw Materials Act, from the European Union perspective, they're more focused on the minimum amount requirements of raw materials that shall be sourced by EU manufacturers. Okay, so far we have covered the objective. Unfortunately, I don't know them by heart, so I really hope the slides will appear soon. But yeah, we're on.
Last question?
Yeah, sure, perfect.
I thought so.
Thank you.
You sort of alluded to this when you were talking about the national park or this flower in Nevada. And this seems to me, whenever we mine something, whether it's fossil fuels or it's lithium or bauxite or lead, there's a cost associated with that as well. And it seems like in terms of understanding the limiting factors associated with how limiting it might be in terms of supply chain and economy, the cost needs to be equally put into how we understand the availability, how it influences how we use it. Now, I haven't seen that represented yet, whether it's sort of tapping into, because it doesn't have to be a national park, it could be in public land, and there's still going to be a negative impact to how we extract something from the earth.
Totally.
I'm just wondering how you are thinking about that piece of the whole puzzle.
Yeah. No, thanks. Thanks a lot. Honestly, it's kind of from a personal perspective, is the part which worries me the most because I wasn't able to see like very inspiring examples about how to tackle it, you know, in a real life. But I think I'm gonna talk about this in a couple of slides for regarding the environmental, social, and governance risks. But there are some, for example, economic tools that they use in the EU, no, but also in the US. For example, I'm thinking of cost-benefit analysis. Like you kind of do it for whatever type of project. If you want to build a highway, now there's benefits, more transport connectivity, more employment, more, I don't know, increasing productivity, but then there's also costs. And I think, for example, if you use a cost-benefit analysis in the government in order to evaluate those projects, you can see if those benefits are enough to balance for those negative costs. And so, for example, it becomes very important to quantify the environmental damage following the construction of the highway or the mine or whatever, the health impacts of the surrounding population, or the emotional impact also. But usually governments, economists, and policymakers need to have those things quantified. And like, how can you quantify the emotional impact of, you know, a mine built on an indigenous population land? There are some studies like behavioral economics, that's something around that. But yeah, it's very, because like it's a very complex mechanism of spillover effects, and then it becomes very difficult to quantify them. I've done a work on landfill emergency securing in Italy, and I've done a cost-benefit analysis of it. So the EU was investing a lot of money to the emergency securing of these illegal dumping sites. And if we look at it from an economic perspective, the solution would be leave them as they are, which is horrifying. Like it's horrible. But then our goal was kind of trying to quantify all the positive impacts in terms of environmental benefit, land productivity, increase in private value of buildings. Not if the house's value increase if there's not an illegal dumping site around, and all sort of things. And in that way, you are able to show that it's actually a valuable thing to do. But yeah, no, it's very difficult. But like, I don't know, for example, the advantage of saving a flower from extinction. Like, we all agree it's like it should be done, but how do you convince the government that it's the right thing to do?
It's a great conversation. I'd love to talk to you about that.
Do you have ideas?
I have ideas. Please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Thank you. No, of course. Thanks for the assist. Okay, so the minerals. Oh, I'm scared of touching. Okay, perfect. Okay, so as I was saying, there's a lot of confusion around the precise terminology, and yeah. So as I was saying, I'm a little bit upset with the generalist press because they keep using random things, and so I made a textbook style slide to put some clarity around them. So we start from the general umbrella. Minerals, no, sorry, the premise is that I'm an economist, so I'm not focusing on the specific properties of what's going on here, nor the technicalities or the possible uses. But I think this is just, you know, the ABC of what I should know, at least. So we have minerals, which is the big umbrella. Solid, naturally occurring inorganic substances. They have a crystal structures, and they are a lot. Of these minerals, some of them contain metallic elements, metals are elementary substances, so you can find them in the periodic table of elements, and they can be grouped according to their properties and their functions. So some of these groupings kind of merge with each other. So for example, we have the base metals, the ferrous metals because they have iron content, the non-ferrous metal because they don't have iron content, and the rare earth metals. Yes. So the main reason why I get upset is that newspaper articles use rare earth to talk about everything, while it's just a tiny part of it. And they're actually not even rare. Like we have them, but it's just their extraction is complex and difficult. So I don't know, they call difficult earth metal, something like that. And Chinese government was very good acting around this. Very strategically good. Had a very strategically good strategy because they focused on the processing of these, and basically they are doing all of it. So super smart on them. They not good, just smart. And so here's the main framework of these critical minerals. So that's why most of the time I use the largest term, critical minerals. So we are not wrong on anything. And so as I was saying, I study these minerals and resources from an economic point of view. So with little originality, I focus on the market fundamentals, demand and supply. Easy. So for the demand, here we have an example of 6 different critical minerals. We have cobalt, copper, lithium, nickel, and 2 rare earths, dysprosium and neodymium. And here you can see the demand side of it. So the energy technologies we use them for. So for example, the permanent magnets for the wind turbines use rare earth. The permanent magnets for electric vehicles also use rare earth. The batteries, super important, most of them are based on lithium, even if there's some technological progress going around there. Solar energy use copper and silver, and the transmission and distribution cable use a lot of copper. This is very important because all the renewable-based technologies require transmission and distribution cables to bring that energy to, I don't know, buildings, infrastructure, and whatever. So also the electrification issue is gonna, the electrification direction, in a sense, is gonna require a lot of these minerals. Actually, the technology based on critical minerals are not solely confined to the energy transition. As you can see from the slides, there are 15 at least different technological applications which depend on these critical minerals. Some are crucial for the energy transition, some for the electric mobility, some for power generation. This is defense for sure, and this is ICT technologies. So super complex demand side. Different minerals are used for different technologies, which are useful for different sectors. And instead, from a supply perspective, it's evident that having issues in terms of availability and the reliability of mineral supply could slow down the energy transition process. So, for example, in terms of availability, scarcity risk is pretty straightforward. You cannot create them, no? So they need to be there in the crusts. Some areas are rich, some areas are not. They may finish in the future, so that's a very big problem. Reserves, it's the amount of minerals which is actually usable and feasible for extraction. I might have the titanium resource in Italy. It cannot become a reserve because I cannot use it. It's totally useless, let's say, from an economic or extraction perspective. Mine production issues, it's not that easy. We see it takes a lot of time from the discovery to the first production, so scarcity risks also there. Low rate of success, a lot of mines, most of them close after 1 or 2 years, even without starting production because of bureaucracy, but also because of maybe overestimations of what's down there in terms of deposits, and so on and so forth. Declining ore grades, the more I mine, the worse the ore grade, exactly, the worse the quality, let's say, of the ore grade gets, and so the less actual value I can get out of it. Depletion time, a mine is not renewable, doesn't go on forever. Substitutability and the recycling rate. Recycling rate, I think, be very important for the future, and we should really invest in technological research around it, because nowadays it's not an issue yet because all the electric fleet is kind of new, so we aren't, getting rid of them yet, but in 5-10 years, we're gonna, some Teslas will not work anymore, and it will be very, very fundamental to tap in that resource of all batteries. So that's scarcity risks. Then we have the supply chain risks with upstream and downstream time and capital lag, material procurement aspects, what the industry is going on. Like nowadays, we have global supply chain, and also you get the lithium from Chile, it goes in China where it's processed, then it's assembled in Taiwan, and then it goes to Mexico where the American factory constructs it and sells it in the US. Super complex. There are a lot of logistical bottlenecks. We've learned this during COVID, no? Like when in the US, there was need for masks, and there was no American producer of masks. Pretty important issue. And then, long project development lead times we already see. So this is the availability part, but then we have also the reliability. So first of all, geographical concentration, the fact that now China has 100% of the global processed graphite production, or Democratic Republic of Congo has 70% of the cobalt production. It means that these resources are very, very geographically concentrated, and as a consequence on the market, this translates into high price volatility. The price change based on what's going on in that country. And if that country is the Democratic Republic of Congo, it changes day by day. And as a consequence, if the price changes, the mining and processing trends change, because if I have a deposit of lithium, I don't want to sell it when there's a very, very low price. I want to make the most out of it. And if I don't want to sell my lithium on the market, then there's a scarcity period, and potentially it can disrupt the market. So super complex market dynamics. And then finally, in terms of reliability, let's not forget about the environmental, social, and governance risks connected with mining, which is a very strong industry. Yeah, exactly. So, I wanted to take some time to focus on this because I feel like oftentimes as economists, we focus more on the productivity, on the price stabilization, and on the bottlenecks on the supply. But then, I don't know, I keep in mind that why I'm studying this is because of the environment, So I always want to see the ecological environmental perspective. And so I think that the ESG framework is very useful to, drive my mind in the right place. And so, for example, if we see, if we analyze closely to mining activities, they bring with them very, very important physical disturbances, especially if we have open pits mine, which is like the classical type of mine. You destroy the environment. Probably you've seen pictures, but it's like that area is totally like destroyed and useless after the mine has happened. And also for the underground mine, which is more the kind of old school coal mining, there's less impact on I don't know, like the visual perspective of the environment, but then it completely destroyed the ecosystem that's around there. Not to mention all the waste tailings and the deposits, which are huge, and they have very, very big impact from an environmental point of view. First of all, when you extract the minerals, you get out, in a sense, the sulfuric acid, and it results in acid mine drainage, and it pollutes all the, not all, but a good part of the surrounding soil and water if the right environmental precautions are not taken. And I have to say, the US is doing a very good job around it. Like, one of the reasons why the US mines are so slow to develop is that the government is very strict and picky about its requirements. They want to be sure that it's not destroying all that's around. Also because of the activism of the people living close to the mine, which it's super important. So water contamination, land contamination, but also air contamination. And when you have air contamination, then you have the acid rain problem, which is much more geographically wide rather than the little river or still important, but less extensive as a phenomenon. And here it's like this is a river, like this is water, and it's in Spain, so pretty developed country, not so far from what we're used to. And the Rio Tinto River became completely orange due to the acid mine drainage. So Spain with good environmental regulations and everything. And then also, I mean, it has impact on the wider geography, because, for example, you have supportive infrastructure, trucks, trains, which results in habitat fragmentation. So that's also very important to keep in mind. And then the social part for the US especially is, I'm not an expert on this, I have to say, but it's a very, very big problem that of the overlapping of mine deposits with Native American reservations. And there's a lot of work going on there. There are a lot of Native American activists working for that, but as you all know better than me, like it's a very, very critical issue. And then clearly the health of the surrounding communities of the mines, as well as for the workers in the mines. I'm going to speed up a little bit. And yeah, so as a consequence, now people are protesting when they feel like governments have approved a mine without not having their approval, their perspectives. And so we see this kind of NIMBYism phenomenon, even though what we would like to aim would be like more of a social license to operate and having governments building community agreements with the surrounding communities, because like if they build a mine, it's going to be huge impacts on the surrounding communities in any case. And then here, for example, we have the horrifying case of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which produces basically all of cobalt, and you have a lot of Chinese enterprises mining in there. There were also a couple of American ones, but on the side of the mine, you have artisanal scale mining, where you literally have women and children mining with their bare hands. I mean, the working conditions are horrifying, and they mine cobalt and then give it directly to the Chinese enterprise or whatever, and that's sold as a clean cobalt, because the cobalt mined by the enterprise is technically, but just a few meters from that you have this horrifying situation. Okay, and then I think I have a couple of minutes to mention briefly my work. Part of my PhD thesis is focused on the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act. Here's a mapping of the projects before the IRA in the US and after. And you can see we have a nice increase in what's going on. And in this work here, which is available as MIT working paper from today, I study the impact that this increase in supply and demand in the US for what concerns cobalt, lithium, and nickel is going to have in terms of prices. So forecasting of prices with conditional scenarios. For example, what will happen to the US price of cobalt if in the next few years the US will manage to develop all those projects that the IRA, the government in general, is planning to fund. What happens if we have a lower demand, higher demand versus lower supply, higher supply, and I combine these scenarios together to see where we're going in the future. Florian, I will not explain those, but I will be happy if you're interested. And here you can find the working paper if you want to read. I will be very, very happy. And then for with MIT, I'm working on the Roosevelt project, which is more in general on the decarbonization of the US economy with some case studies. And I'm working on the North American mining case. And the goal is that of studying and proposing best practices which should accompany the mineral development for the energy transition. And so we're working on identifying environmental and social impact recommendation and permitting, which is very, very important, and it's what makes US mine decent, but also together with the importance of actually developing a domestic supply and mitigating the risks of import reliance, as well as investing in technological development. And then this is the second part instead of my PhD thesis. I didn't stress a lot during the talk the importance of market power. Probably it's a little bit more boring, I don't know. But basically, when you have very, very concentrated resources in some countries, you can have the risk of cartelization. Also, when countries get together and they own together, I don't know, 80% of the global supply, and they can set the price. Usually, they set the price higher, so they can have a higher profit. And it's what happened with the oil market, not the OPEC. It's exactly that. And in my opinion, we could see a very parallel thing happen for critical minerals. For example, for lithium, you have the lithium triangle, which is Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. Very close, similar geographical characteristics. The governments could be thinking, why not? But then this could have very, very bad impacts, from a price perspective. And so I'm trying to simulate the difference between the price in a monopoly versus in a perfectly competitive market. And my idea is that if the price in the monopoly is much higher, there's a potential of profit for cartelization, and so we might risk seeing the cartelization of lithium or something. Like Indonesia has already started kind of spreading these rumors about a battery cartel. Let's see. I hope I find it out before they find out. And then finally, in Fondazione Ilenia Mattei, which is a research foundation in Italy, they recently opened this program on raw materials for the energy transition, and I'm very happy I'm part of it. And we're developing a different stream of projects, and actually I'm on one that I highlighted, and we kind of try to study it from a forecasting perspective as well as from a trade network perspective. So, for example, here you can see the trade network, so all the countries and how they are interconnected with import and export flows. And this is lithium oxide and hydroxide for the year 2002. And then here it's the same thing for the year 2022. So it's like, it's shrunk a lot. And there's, no, as I've explained during the talk, this is not very good. Okay, so I think, yeah, that's it. This is the link to my Thailand projects. And if you want recommended readings, the first are more report style. This is more books like not narrative, but very easy to read books. And then two documentaries, Avatar and Dune, which are around mining. And I think it's, I don't know, I was thinking while doing the presentation, I should write something around the economics of mining from these two movies, because they are really, really well done from an economic point of view.
All right, so, sure. So thank you so much to our speaker for that wonderful talk. I know we're right at time, so for folks that need to leave, please feel free to take off. But if folks have questions, maybe you can stay a couple minutes. Great, I know I have one, but I'll let other people.
Or if you have to go and you have a question, you can email me and I know.
So you mentioned recycling a little bit. I mean, there's already lots of recycling. For example, people are ripping up copper wires because copper is so expensive. So that's sort of unofficial recycling. But it sounds like one can do a lot more in terms of recycling minerals now. Can you say a little bit more about efforts in that area?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's true. Copper is a very good example. Also in Italy, we have this case of people stealing the copper from the
Train track.
exactly from the train tracks. Exactly. Sorry, I didn't.
Same in England.
Same thing. Okay, so it's a global trend. While the difference I would say is that first of all, copper it's easier to build and to use. No, while for example, if you think of the phone, it has pretty important amounts of lithium, cobalt, and nickel, but it's very, very tricky to get them out. Like for sure, we in this very moment, we couldn't do it. And the tricky part also is that you would have smaller amounts of mineral in a lot of cell phones, a lot of cars, and everything. While for copper, it's easy because either on the trucks or also on the wires. It's easier to recycle. But yeah, there are a lot of projects, a lot of them in the US around the recycling part. It's more at the, I don't know if it's the right term, startup kind of development phase, but I'm sure there's going to be very, very interesting developments. And the technical concept of this is urban mining, and it's like mining. Urban, I don't know, probably the city is like the main core of it, but it's exactly like mining from the things that we already have, rather than mining from. And I think for the US, this will be important, but mostly for Europe, because we are a very important demand player. Now we consume, luckily, a lot of renewables. In a sense, we have a lot of PV plants, wind turbines, and electric vehicles also. So they're really investing in these new developments. But I don't know. I don't have in mind like a leading player, let's say, in the market, but for sure they are really investing in it. And if you think about it, like now we would be in the phase where we are developing a lot of the opportunities for which mining, urban mining will become fundamental. Now, like the goal is, I was reading this morning, that the US is doing huge investments in the EV fleet development. So right now they're building the EV fleet and so on and so forth. But then in 10, 15 years, we will need to recycle that EV fleet. So this gives us a little bit of time to learn how to recycle those. But then in 15 years, we will be closer to 2050. So yeah, it's tricky.
So I have a related question because exactly because of what you just said, I imagine that I would say it's important to do it now actually, because it will take some time.
Yeah.
This is not about, developing the project, but even understanding what is the project and how to do it. So I was wondering whether this is an aspect that is considered in the policy recommendation, like for example, what you are studying or what you are aiming at?
The recycling.
Yeah, specifically.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Because as you said, like we need to have the technology ready. Like we cannot waste more time. So the European Union is investing a lot. The US, I cannot remember because the Inflation Reduction Act is huge. So they have a project for the extraction, project for the processing, project for the car manufacturers, obviously, that's almost the most important thing. And also projects for the, how do you say, when you create something like artificially in a lab, synthesize, I don't know, synthetic metals is an alternative. But I'm thinking about the recycling in the US. Probably there's someone I should, yeah. But you is investing. Yeah, I see why the US is investing more from the car manufacturer perspective. Like they're such an important power. They have such an important power. So, yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about whether or not you think deep sea mining is viable and how that could play into some of these discussions.
Thank you. That's very, very interesting. I don't know if I have a clear opinion about it. In Europe, Norway is the only country who's actually thinking about it seriously. It's almost getting it done, if I'm not wrong. But yeah. So first of all, it's very complex from a technical perspective, and there need to be very specific conditions, if I've understood it correctly, for it to be possible and viable. Norway appears to be lucky. I think they talked about this in the US also, no, as an alternative. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about the environmental impact, if I have to be honest, because it's like, what happens under the sea stays under the sea. And I don't know, it looks a little bit scary. Also because like the classic mine on land, we've been doing it forever, and still we are not able to control the spillovers. So I can't imagine, under the sea, what happens. And then also the fact that Norway is advancing it as a technological future, like Norway is an oil superpower, so yeah, like I don't think they're gonna do deep sea mining with sun powered machineries. I'm sure they're happy to put all the oil they have for that. But no, I mean, I'm still curious to see what happens. I don't wanna be like super skeptical about it. But yeah, and also the other doubt I have is in terms of productivity. Like I don't know how the potential extraction, like how the amount, the produced amount, how big that could be. It looks a little bit scattered. No, so yeah. Yes.
In your work looking at potential for cartels, are there particular characteristics of some minerals that seem more likely, easier for a cartel to form or not? And I also wonder, not to complicate a lot, do you consider like a vertically integrated cartel? So one where you're sort of like maybe the Indonesia batteries example, where you're trying to get the mine, the processing, the battery, the car.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, yeah, no, great questions. So the first part, yes, the mineral differences. Yes, basically I'm starting from geographical concentration consideration. So for example, for nickel, I wouldn't worry too much around it because it's used, it's been used for quite a lot. The US is a big producer. So if there's the US around, I doubt that other countries will try to build a cartel. So that's out. But then, for example, cobalt, it could be potentially a danger. However, 70% of it comes from Congo, and I doubt that some more developed countries will want to form a cartel with Congo, because of geopolitical issues and reliability in a sense of the cartel partner. While, for example, no, the one I mentioned, the lithium, Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile, I could see it, because cartel has a lot of costs to function, no? Cooperation costs, coordination, politics, which have to be pretty aligned. And so for Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile, I don't know, it looks like the countries have, could match nicely. But so that's, I'm studying it just for the mineral extraction, but I totally agree with you, like a vertically integrated cartel, they would win, no? Like from a profit point of view, no? You have the country mining the mineral, the country processing them, and the country selling them. However, for coordination costs, I hope like that's also because most of the time the supply chain is very unequal. Like the upstream part, which is the one of the raw materials part, usually it's less developed economies, and then you have the processing part, which is for example China. But then you have the big Western economies like the US, who want the very last part of the supply chain, but it's the one which brings with it most of the profit, no? The Tesla. While all the dirty part, they leave it to the other countries. And so, like, I cannot think of a cartel with, I don't know, like Indonesia, China, Taiwan, and US. Like that's a lot to coordinate, but it's good. Like
World peace.
Exactly. Exactly. So yes, but another type of cartel which I'm not studying, but I think it's pretty interesting. It's between firms rather than with the countries. So, for example, a cartel within. I mean, Chile is nationalizing a little bit, so I don't know if that's the right case, but I don't know, Argentina, for example, you have a couple of very of mining giants. What happens if they get together and boom, they kick out of the market all the other smaller competitors? And that's oftentimes the case, because as you can imagine, like I cannot, you know, I wake up one day and I'm like, well, let's build a mining company. There are huge sunk costs and they don't let you do exploration so easily. So I think that's also pretty interesting to study. But yeah, I don't have the data at the mine level, so she said.
Luckily with Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina, I think they will never form a cartel with the mines because they all hate each other because they fought wars over stealing the mines.
Yeah,
And we're still not over it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I will still study.
I think politically and socially, that one's maybe less of a risk,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
though geographically they're close because they all fought.
Absolutely. But in fact, the success of cartels usually is very low. The only working one is the one for oil. But in the past, they tried to. It's yeah. But it will become less and less relevant, hopefully.
Despite what all of Hollywood has told me, I guess we're being lied to by the movies.
The cartels work.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, I know we need to wrap up because we need to grab the computer back, but I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
again. And if folks have more questions. Thank you, thank you. It's very They're having lunch with the candidates. So theoretically, catch up for rest. So we separate for, but if you want to go, there's some guys that like. Just, I mean, I'm not going to these. Okay. So I was searching for like talks about environment.